welcome to Video Games Revisited. This review is a request by a long-time viewer and somebody who always takes the time to check out my new videos and leave a comment. It's a YouTuber called The Stig, and he's requested I review Factory Panic on the Game Gear.
Factory Panic is a puzzle-orientated action game from 1991. It was developed by Sega and was only available in Europe and Japan. In this game you take on the role of a young boy who seems to spend the majority of his time busting into factories to bring essentials like video games and cake, as well as luxuries like food and medicine, to the people of his town who appear to be under the rule of some kind of totalitarian government. Rather bizarrely, if you're playing the Japanese version, the main character is Mikhail Gorbachev. Whether this is some kind of social commentary or just typical Japanese quirkiness, it's unclear, but the two versions seem to be almost identical other than this, so it kind of seems irrelevant. As you can see, the graphics are clear and colourful, and the characters are all well drawn and animated and fit the quirky style of the game nicely. The sound is fairly standard and functional, the most notable point being the regular occurrence of a famous part of Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. With regards to the gameplay, as I mentioned previously, the focus of the game is simply getting the correct goods to the correct people and sending them on their way, which sounds relatively simple, but you can't just pick up these goods from the factory and bring them to the correct people. You have to use the layout of the factory's conveyor belts and various other bits like switches and movable conveyor belts to achieve this. The puzzles involved are pretty well conceived and generally consist of just altering the layout slightly to route the goods as they drop onto the conveyor belts, but obviously as the game progresses the puzzles get harder and more sophisticated and focus a lot more on getting the specific goods to specific people, as opposed to the first few levels where there's only one kind of person queuing up and one kind of goods on the conveyor belt. If however you don't route the goods quickly or efficiently enough, the villagers will either end up with the wrong goods or will end up receiving the many hazardous goods like bones and broken objects and even poison. And if this happens, you'll find your time limit, which can be found on the top right hand side of the screen, reduced. However, your attention will be split between the puzzle solving and being pursued by the various factory workers that will be coming after you. These enemies range from a lowly security guard with a stick marching after you to a cheesed off Russian fella holding a machine gun. And as you'd expect, these higher level of enemies pose a much greater threat, and if they catch up to you and hit you enough times, you will die, forcing you to use one of your continues if you wish to carry on playing. To defend yourself from these enemies, you are given, as standard, a shout, which will knock your enemies back and stun them for a few seconds. However, this attack can be upgraded by collecting either a megaphone or a guitar from the conveyor belts. Now, being given sound as your main weapon might not sound particularly effective. However, it is fairly crucial to surviving the relentless attacks of the enemies on the later levels, and I quite often find myself just spamming the attacks to knock them back onto the screen while I work away at the complex series of switches I'm needing to press. As you work your way up through the levels, the puzzles do of course get harder and harder and require a lot more thought and awareness of what's going on around you to survive. In fact, things get pretty crazy later in the game, which causes a genuine issue, as instead of a nice password system that's present in a lot of puzzle games of the time, you're given a limited amount of continues. And as some of these levels take both a considerable amount of skill and a fair bit of time to complete, going back to the beginning after you've died a couple times becomes a real pain, and it's quite laborious to work your way through a couple dozen levels just to try and squeeze a little bit further in the story, only to find the next level is just that little bit harder and you end up dying again and back to square one. So whilst Factory Panic has enough variety and positive points to make it a worthwhile game to play, thanks to its innovative mix of action and puzzle solving, unless you're a very skilled or a very patient gamer, it'll probably just be a casual distraction for a few minutes, rather than a game you're going to dedicate a lot of time to and work your way through. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you next time.